Okay, there we go, we're on. Right, so we're here to talk about international PropTech markets. Hopefully that's given you a good basis of understanding about sort of what PropTech is ultimately and what it means to you. What I want to do now is to bring in a more international PropTech perspective, because ultimately, when I talk there about the different mentality, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot around the world is there's two things which are preventing PropTech to happen. Number one is mentalities, and number two is infrastructure. Some countries have the right mentality, they want to instigate change, but they haven't got the right infrastructure in which to do so. Other countries have the complete opposite. They have the right infrastructure, but ultimately they don't have this mentality of change. And that's something I want to discuss here with my esteemed guests. So I've got Daniel from Nordic PropTech. I've got Leo all the way from Hong Kong. Ivan, Mr. Russia via Finland. And Robin all the way from France. So gentlemen, I'd like you just, if I can, perhaps give us a short introduction, maybe start with you, Ivan, about PropTech in Russia and how you're finding it and whether it's different to the German market.
Thanks. I'll try to be brief, as agreed. I would say that PropTech, first of all, let me say that I agree very much with the analogy that you just
what, teenage sex?
Yes, about teenage sex, because it is really, I mean, there's huge resemblance. Because it was funny when we had our Eurasia PropTech Summit in Moscow in the beginning of the year. We also had a panel discussing, how PropTech was in every country. And every person who took the microphone said, we are not so advanced as other countries. And then the next guy, took the microphone and said, well, we are not, yet there, as Germany or as the US. And there was a guy from the US who said, we are not so advanced as Asia, and so on. So obviously everybody else is thinking that somebody else is more advanced or more developed. And in Russia, PropTech is basically at the same stage as everywhere. It is just different because Russia is a very special mix of different epochs, I would say. I mean, we have Middle Ages, we have modern societies, and everything is mixed inside the same country. That's what's different about Russian PropTech, but so is everything else in Russia. Otherwise, we have pretty much all the all lines of businesses that, again, James, you lined up in your previous presentation. There are many companies who are in the PropTech business. We as PropTech Russia are tracking 3,500 companies globally, and about maybe 20% of those are Russian companies, and it's a very vast arena.
Okay, how's it with you, Robin, in France, as a comparison to Germany?
Hi, everybody. I think the French market, the PropTech market, hasn't peaked yet. Just to give you some figures, we have 400 startups with 3,500 employees, and 1/4 of them have been created just last year, so it is quite recent. I think the most promising startup have already picked up the low-hanging fruits of the market. So now the segment of the market still available are quite hard to break into, and we are more and more focused on construction tech, and we are more and more focused on some B2C companies, on the rental management, on brokers, but it's very difficult to break into because the market is divided between local players, and the advertising cost just to be able to be known by the customers are very, very high. For instance, just to give you a fun fact, but the AdWord for Paris and real estate is just costs 40 euros. So it's very difficult to break into the market when you're in a new company. And just to address the B2C segments. And the most promising companies now are some B2B providers, mainly IT providers, able to create bundle offers really to help large rates or large retail or offices rates to improve their efficiency and to make real productivity gains.
Okay, it's got an interesting point you raised there about construction technology, because one of the things that I'm finding around the world is that there seems to be a massive split between PropTech and construction tech. And that is both on people cataloging it as much as it is about the investment. And actually, when we're dealing with the physical asset of the property market, if you think that we've often talked about planning as a PropTech and buying and selling as a PropTech, the one reason we put build in there is because there's a massive gulf in the middle between planning and buying and selling, which we're all missing. So it's an interesting point that you're talking about construction technologies being so big. And talking of big markets, surely with Asia Pac having 60% of all suggested funding in PropTech, isn't Asia the biggest market there is, Leo?
Well, I think, yeah, in terms of investment, why Asia Pac can get a huge portion, 60%, as you mentioned, I think it's mostly they come from China, you know. China is a huge market. I think amongst the top 5 well-funded PropTech companies, there are 3 coming from China.
Yeah.
But to be honest, they are doing something like the MLP services, the portals things. So in which I think they are only the PropTech 1.0 things. Okay. So they're not that, I mean, into the PropTech 2.0 or 3.0 things yet. So to me, I think China is a very interesting market. You can see there are some companies doing something really on the PropTech sector, but they don't regard them as a PropTech company.
Yeah.
They're doing things like, okay, I just do that thing. For example, I know a company working on automated valuation model, AVM, in China. They basically now provide the solutions to over 100 of mortgage banks in China. Some mortgage banks even directly recognize the valuation results generating from the AVM. But that company never understand that they are in the PropTech space. Okay. So interestingly, because after I talked to them, okay, well, you're so great, you did something great already in the PropTech space. And then they say, we're in the PropTech space. So that's very interesting. In China, maybe many companies are doing some right things. They have the mentality to change because it's a huge and new economy market. Compared with Hong Kong, I'm from Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a very mature real estate market. To be honest, the real estate developers there are not that competitive. You know, Hong Kong get the highest housing prices in the world. Yeah. Even expensive than London, expensive than New York, Tokyo. We always have a joke that even you build a 100 square feet studio unit, there will thousands or even 10,000 of people queuing up to buy that property. So no competition at all. Yeah. But they are more competitive in the retail space. So I can see there are more PropTech companies working in retail space in Hong Kong. Okay. So that's the trend. And Hong Kong, interestingly, I think maybe this year, the government started to look into PropTech. There are major developers. We had meetings with them this year to talk about how to push the PropTech development. So I regard that maybe this year is the year 0 for the PropTech in the Greater China region. Okay, for Japan, for Korea, for Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is great. I mean, most of them are emerging markets like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and there are lots of PropTech company startups.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it certainly seems that most of the investment is going into China and the other regions.
Maybe India as well. Yeah.
And India's a similar one, where there's a lot of investment in single monopoly-based businesses, but actually the scale in terms of the breadth, as in the smaller startups coming in, certainly in the research that we've done, we're not seeing many companies, but the companies that are there are massive, massive companies. So talking of sort of maybe slightly smaller markets, the world of Scandinavia, it's a little bit smaller than Asia, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, my point, building on to what you said, Ivan, is that property is really a global thing. I would say that, I wouldn't say that some markets are much more advanced than others. From our perspective, is really that depending on country-specific factors, some are good in retail, others are focusing on construction. I wouldn't say that they're, you know, PropTech is such a huge segment or vertical. So for us, I think in terms of Nordics, we're doing well. We have at least a few hundred companies doing PropTech. Given that we have an infrastructure fairly advanced in terms of digital, we have a lot of digital companies and connectivity is well established in the Nordic countries. This is something that is making it easier for PropTech companies to grow. Also, given that real estate data and the availability and the standardization of real estate data has been abundant for the last 20 years, that is also something that is helping this segment to progress and companies to develop products faster and in some ways have come a bit further than I see, at least in other countries or geographies.
Okay, that's interesting to know. And I think just picking up on a few points that we said around here, one of the things that we're also saying is that PropTech as a whole, if you imagine a large Venn diagram with PropTech in the middle, the fascinating thing about this industry is that you've got FinTech, construction tech, retail tech, secure tech, legal tech, mortgage tech, what else have we got? There's so many of them which feed into this property space, and energy tech, environment tech, blah, blah, blah. It's all over the place, so it's quite fascinating. Now, a question perhaps to Robin to start with. In Australia last week, it was fascinating that the advice they gave the PropTech startups was don't think about the consumer or the customer, because in Australia, the market is governed by the REITs, the real estate investment trusts, and there are 11 real estate investment trusts which control 80% of all buildings in Sydney, for example. So their advice was it's being driven by the property market, not PropTech. My question to you is, what is driving the change in France? Is it PropTech? Is it property? And what advice would you give?
The French market is dominated by large players, among the largest in Europe on retail, on residential, and so on. So these players are very important. It is very difficult for a young new company to fight against the incumbent. So most of the startup have adopted some symbiotic behavior and tried to be providers of IT solutions to the largest property companies. So I would say the market is led by the property traditional established companies. In our survey on the French market, 9 out of 10 of the largest companies rates or retail companies have decided to invest money in the PropTech scene and startups. So most of them collaborate with startups. Sometimes invest directly. Sometimes invest for funds. So they are currently leading the market. One point which is missing in France is on the residential side, France doesn't have some large property residential rates. It is a lot of small private owners, so it's very difficult to address them because it is millions of private owners. And in France, and it is the same in the UK. I mean, social housing is very important, and what we are seeing in France is the growing role of social housing manager, because these companies just manage sometimes 1 million, 1.5 million residential units. So it's just crazy. They are quite rich, and they are able to be some very powerful driver for adopting some tech in the residential part of the market.
I tell you what, I heard a statistic earlier on which shocked me. By 2030, there will be more than 1 billion people over the age of 65 alive in China. So when you're talking about PropTech affecting affordable housing solutions, this is one of the biggest areas I'm finding around the world, which is using technology to help housing solutions for the older generation, which I think is a very interesting one. Ivan, the same question to you in terms of your marketplace. Is it being driven by property, or is it driven by PropTech?
I think the peculiar thing about the Russian market is that I think it's propelled very much by the technology. In fact, I think most of the actors in the PropTech world in Russia believe that PropTech is a temporary. It's like a process of changing the mindset of traditional business in order to become digital business. So it's like a temporary thing that shall pass in the future. And I think this is the approach that most of the companies that we work with in Russia are taking. And it is very much being built sort of bottom up, which I think personally is the kind of the great way to change an industry, especially traditional industry and conservative industry such as the real estate industry. And what we are seeing more and more is that the technology companies are focusing on solving a very focused problem and focusing on being kind of very good at one or several microservices, and then just basically combining these microservices into an ecosystem or as a living organism. And I think it's all very much in line with the general development of our kind of the human knowledge, I would dare say, because I mean, even if you think about health and well-being, scientists have recently been, psyched with the idea of microbiome, for example, that we, even as living organisms, we're not. I mean, we consist of many microbiota that live inside us, right? So
this
so
is getting a little deep for a PropTech.
Yeah, but the same can be applied to business, because I think the age of these massive monolithic solutions is over, and it's being overtaken by small, agile, adaptive services that can emerge fast, adapt fast, and be implemented fast. And this,
which is, but it's ironic given the fact that just in the last month we've had two massive monolithic businesses reach the $1 trillion valuation. So it's an interesting one. Just in terms of the Slido, if any of you guys have got any questions, I'm really keen to ask questions from the floor. So you've got the Slido app up there with the hashtag. If you've got any questions you want to ask us, please definitely put it in there. And if Jacob could switch that on to the questions, that would be fantastic. So if you have any questions, do put it in here, and I'll bring them in as they come in. Daniel, in terms of the sort of the Baltics, in fact, what are you? Scandinavia,
just
Nordics?
Nordics.
Nordics. You forget Finland.
Nordics. No, Finland is part of the Nordics for sure.
So what's the difference between Scandinavia and Nordic?
No, I'm not Scandinavia. I'm Nordics.
Oh. You forget Denmark then?
No.
Oh,
Denmark's included.
You're inclusive.
Yeah.
Okay. Nordics, property or PropTech? Who's driving the market?
I think, from my perspective, it's both. I think a lot of change in real estate, at least where I see it, is driven by a societal change in regards to sustainability, in that we're not using the assets in the way that we could potentially do. I mean, we could improve utilization of assets. We could improve in the amount of resources they consume in terms of energy and things like that. And I think society is starting to realize that real estate is a big part of saving the planet. Yeah. And that is driving change, especially in a market, for instance, such as Sweden, which is where a lot of real estate is owned by pension capital, and that is important for them to be sustainable, which is in turn driving real estate change. On the other hand, of course, the change is also being visualized by new tech companies, not just PropTech companies, but general tech companies, where people and users can see that what is actually possible if you use technology in terms of providing a better user experience. So I think real estate is being sort of driven by two forces at the same time.
All right, interesting. Nikita, where are you, Nikita? Great question. So this is actually in line with one of my ones later, so I'm going to bring it in now because I think you've asked that brilliantly. So biggest innovation so far in PropTech. Leah, what are your thoughts on that? Just to put you on the spot. I mean, this is a big question.
Right.
The biggest, the only one.
Biggest. To be honest, I can't figure out any biggest one, innovation. But because technologies keeps changing over the years. Just like 2 years ago, we talked a lot about a blockchain, but up to now, maybe still taking time to be mature. In the recent 1 year, we talked a lot about AI. To me, when I talked to some institutional real estate investors in Hong Kong earlier this year, they're from AIG, GIC, you name it, many of them. They concern much about how AI can assist the investment decisions
Yeah.
on their portfolio. So to me, I believe maybe AI is really something that can be innovative enough to change the investment world in PropTech. Yeah.
And arguably, actually, your next question, Nikita, is probably there as well. Biggest disruptive innovation for me. AI as a classification arguably is very disruptive as much as it is innovative. Robin, any thoughts on, in terms of the biggest innovation for you that you've seen so far?
It's difficult to point out one single biggest innovation, but I think all the things related to drones could have a major impact, especially on the ability to measure the quality of the building, and we can save a lot of money just to make some minor repairs, or just to measure the quality of a building, to assess what is the roof or something like that. So I think it's very useful innovation for all the people in the building and architectural part of the sector.
Okay. A point goes to Mr. X, whoever you are, for the most sensible question of the day so far. Thank you ever so much for your teenage sex question. Oh, and it's been upvoted, so you guys want me to ask it. Thank you ever so much. Daniel, biggest innovation for you?
The thing when I look on commercial real estate, I think that there isn't really a big innovation needed to drive change, because we can adopt so many of the innovations already done so far. I mean, building information models is one part of the equation. I think as an industry, we're just so not transparent at all. I mean, if we were just to manage the building data and the data generated by a building, it could improve a lot of the uncertainties and the frictions in the processes around real estate, from construction to managing to buying and selling.
Yeah.
So I would see that as starting to have some sort of standardization. You could have real estate as a much more liquid asset, reducing a lot of friction, reducing a lot of time. That would be, for a game changer.
Arguably, the biggest innovation I think we could see here is the breaking up of infrastructure, of building as a 100% owned asset and making it a more liquid. I couldn't agree more. But you mentioned there about data. So is it Kohn? Apologies, my German sort of naming is bad. So do you see any common data architecture being established in the PropTech world? Ivan, I know you're a data guy. Do you feel this?
In fact, just to continue what Daniel started talking about, building information modeling in general, it's a really hot topic. And Russia in particular is adapting BIM as this BIM as a requirement to get construction permits starting from next year, which I think is a really great thing, because the common data architecture has been a huge problem. And we know about initiatives like Oscar, for example, in the US, which are basically dead-born, or I mean, they might work in the US, but not outside the US, especially not in Europe, where every country, especially Germany, have very specific regulations and statutory requirements. So I think with regards to, just to answer both questions actually at the same time, I think the biggest impact or the biggest innovation is, let's say, looking at the industry as data management. And the common data architecture is obviously going to be based on building information models, on the 3D, 4D, 5D, and so on, adding on, financial layer, adding, details. And what's more important is the attempts that we are now seeing, and there are companies like Alpha Open, for example, in Russia, which are huge in terms of creating a data management system that can pull data from different sources and make sense of it. And BIM model transferring from the construction stage to facility management stage to property management stage to selling, and basically keeping the same data infrastructure throughout the whole life cycle of a building. This is the most impactful change, I think. With regards to the biggest innovation, though, I think data-driven approach to consumers, to visitors of commercial buildings, to people who dwell in their residential buildings. This is also, I think, it's also kind of data-based approach. Because nowadays we know very much about who people are and what they do and how they live and so on.
Scarily so.
Huge.
Robin, any thoughts on this data architecture? Question from you: is this an area that you're interested in? As in, do you see a common data infrastructure around? No. Okay, that's fine. Well, I'll skip on that. Jacob, if you can just delete that question for me, that would be great. One of the things, just picking up on the BIM side, one of the most exciting developments I'm seeing around the world is this concept of the digital twin. I think you're going to hear that phrase an awful lot over the next 5 years, because I always believe that we look at property, to bring in what you said, Daniel, as something in isolation. We build it, we sell it, we move on. What we're starting to see now is this as a service aspect within the property cycle. So we talk about space as a service. We've got sensors as a service. I think we've also now got to start looking at buildings as a service. And this is where the digital twin comes in, which is once you build it, you've then got to realize that actually that asset isn't then exhausted. It will be there for the lifetime. You can monetize that asset for the lifetime that it is there, but you will do that and it will be augmented by having the digital twin of that building. It starts working from BIM upwards, where we can start building everything into this digital model of a property. So I think it's a really interesting concept and one that we should definitely know. I'm just conscious, we've got 4 minutes left, although Alex is posturing quite...
You know, I don't have a microphone anymore because you all use them up. So that's why I'm trying to come onto stage, because I would love to use the next couple of minutes to raise a question as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, so, of course.
I mean, you wrap it up, but we talk about PropTech as a global phenomenon, and it's really great to have you guys here. I mean, this is what it is all about tech. You have so many countries on stage, and this is something that the established industry has not yet understood, or at least lived up to. So my question to you, all of you, is what's the next logical step for a PropTech in your country, in your geography, to expand? Where do companies go from the UK, from Russia, from Finland, from Nordics, from China, if they leave China at all, or from France? Robin, I hand this back to you.
No pressure, Robin.
What we're seeing is French companies and French PropTech or construction and startups are currently expanding in Europe, in neighboring countries in Europe. For instance, some in Spain, some in Italy, some willing to come to Germany, and as I said, France has some of the largest players in, for instance, in construction, and some company acting as providers, IT providers for such players are coming with these guys in some geographies like Asia, for instance. For instance, companies providing IT solution to Bouygues, which is one of the largest builder in the world, just expand in Singapore or in Hong Kong, bringing their own solution. So I think the expansion will be driven by the largest players, bringing some of the local and national startups with them aboard.
Anybody else?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, because it really depends on what type of company it is. I mean, and your domestic market, if you're into sort of real estate financing, you might have a big enough market internally, so you don't have to grow for a couple of years, so you can establish a very nice cash flow generating business in one market, and then you can scale that. Whereas if it's a standardized business such as retail, you might be needing to scale that to a lot of countries to get the scale needed. But if you're a co-working company, you have to target the biggest cities, and then it's not a country play, it's a city play. So from my end, it's really depending on what type of segment or type of PropTech company.
See, I think it's quite an easy step, actually, in some sense, depending on your ego. I said at the start there are 6,000, 7,000 businesses around the world. If you take health tech, biotech, where 90% of PropTech startups fail, it doesn't have to look that much further down the line in terms of seeing what that might be in a potential industry in the next 5 years. For me, it's just two simple words: consolidate and collaborate. I think if you're a PropTech startup, you've really got to work out what you're good at, what your strengths are as a business, look nationally at businesses that complement your current offering, and look internationally at whether there are similar businesses to yours that you can very quickly work with to grow the business out and be a far bigger entity. If you're from the property side, I think the idea of collaborating is absolutely key. You know, I said it very flippantly about teenage sex and all this sort of stuff, but there's a serious message there. You've got to get out and speak to the industry. You've got to go and sit down and talk to them and understand their business model. So consolidate if you're a PropTech business, collaborate if you're a property business, I think. And if I may, we've got 2 seconds, 1 second, 0 seconds left. So on that, and I've got a picture of a baby. That's nice, isn't it? I would say there's one thing I just want to ask all on my panel. In the interest of this being a global panel, in one company, so no more than that, if there's one company in PropTech Russia that you would recommend all of these guys know, what would it be, Ivan? Which company?
I would.
Not your own.
I'm tempted to. Yeah, I'm tempted, but it's not my own company. Besides, it's a Finnish company, not Russian.
Okay.
In Russia, it will be Retail Analytics. It's a company who provides offline to online conversion of data management with regards to visitors of commercial buildings.
Okay,
really
perfect.
great company.
We're going to get kicked off. So Daniel,
brief answer,
in
please.
Scandinavia, you're one company that you would recommend everyone?
I don't have one. I have a fantastic company that we are looking into investing in now, also in the retail space, but it's an American company, but active. From me, it's not important where the geography is coming from.
So not that one, but that's 2 retail ones. Anything else that you'd recommend?
There is a very interesting company called Nordic doing real estate financing side. So they're tracking debt position and derivatives for real estate companies.
Okay, perfect. Leo, in China?
China is so big, so it's not easy to
Just
name
one,
one.
only
Just
one?
Maybe what I mentioned about the AVM company, because they are doing something disruptive to the mortgage value chain.
And what are they called?
Yeah, FundCent. FundCent. 10 cent cent.
Okay.
FundCent. Yeah.
And Robin, France, what would you do?
HABX, which is a crowd builder and help future home buyer to personalize their flats.
Perfect. Guys, thank you very much. I want to thank my panel. Remember, this is a global solution to a global problem, which is PropTech. Thanks ever so much. Thanks, guys.
James,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Before you go off stage, stay here for a second, come close, because